Welcome, Samuel Luna, to Ordinary Visionaries. And Samuel, tell me, how are you an ordinary visionary?
Ordinary visionary, I guess since my retirement, I retired 20 years ago last week. I've been retired for 20 years, and after 20 years, I looking for continuing uh, in serving because I've always served all my life on committees, and nonprofits, and whatever. And just by coincidence, I got involved in a program. I got invited to a program that derailed my plans for retirement, and that program involved looking at veterans. It was a veteran program looking at trauma, and so I've been dealing with that for all my life since I returned from Vietnam. And I went to the program, and lo and behold, I came face to face with the war in Vietnam and how it had affected me, and so that changed my life and I became a visionary, I guess, at that time, because it was my vision became to serve veterans, educate veterans on post-traumatic stress that I had just come face to face with, and started therapy.
So you were in Vietnam how many years, and what time period was that?
It was during the Vietnam War in 60. I was in Vietnam in 68 and 69.
Okay.
And yeah, that's really, I spent 2 years in the military.
Right.
And,
My dad was a military officer, career officer all his year in the Canadian Air Force. So,
oh, wow.
but that was pre-Vietnam. He served in World War II. The whole shebang. So, I haven't talked to a Vietnam veteran about their experience, and I don't want to go too deeply into your experience necessarily, but I would like to find out, what impact did your serving in Vietnam have on your life? What was the ripple effect? Was there trauma from that? How did that affect your life?
Yeah, well, like I said, I came back from Vietnam, finished school, got married, so when I came face to face with Vietnam, and right after my retirement, I started therapy because I didn't know anything about trauma and what I might be experiencing and all that. I knew there was something different. My wife sadly knew more that there was a lot different, going on with me than for so many years. And so coming face to face with it, I started understanding that my life had been quite impacted, and my psychiatrist started telling me all this stuff, and he said, well, what it is that you came back from Vietnam and started doing life, and you had this black box, you put it on your mantle, and trying to navigate life with by not paying attention to it, because you got an education, raised a family, had a successful career, all kinds of things happen, and you're here today because retirement approached. You had a heart attack, and and went to got to the VA and learned that you have post-traumatic stress, and so now it's time to open the black box and start dealing with what happened in Vietnam, and that's what that was almost 20 years ago. But the previous 20 year, I didn't know anything. It was not talked about, or we didn't know what to talk about.
So how long was it between your Vietnam service and when you started to work with Get Therapy?
30 years, 35.
So you lived with that sort of in the black box, which is in a way what we're talking about is your subconscious, right?
Yes. And yeah, and it's for me, I guess I got trained. I got a year of training from the army before I went to Vietnam. And so I was, you know, I went to NCO Academy and got to, I got to train to be a squad leader, a sergeant. And so after the year, they sent me to Vietnam as a leader. And so that was even more responsibility for this kid, that I had 8 or 10 men that I was in charge of, and that I could not, you know, show any fear, or anything of that nature. And therefore, I started looking at, when I started therapy, they said, yeah, I didn't know anything about Vietnam. I couldn't, my time in Vietnam was like a blank. It was like a blank, and I worked on a timeline with my therapist for 2 years to try.
You could hardly remember what had happened. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I have pictures of combat, and I have temporal pictures of bodies that somewhere.
Yeah.
But I never knew that what happened, how those bodies were like that, and started going to reunions about 6 years ago. Started reconnecting with the guys from Vietnam, and I started asking questions about our time. And there was this write-up in the paper that I met, where I was in one time, and it was a John Wayne response that I gave this reporter, and I, knew that I hadn't done that, or I said, no, I didn't do that. And so I kept asking people, and they remember that article, and they said, yeah, no, I don't, didn't know anything until I ran into, at the last reunion, I ran into a gentleman that was a driver. He was a driver on my personal carrier. And he said, yeah, that was you and I. That was you and I that were clearing after a firefight. And yeah, we were clearing, and this North Vietnamese soldier sat up with a grenade. And he said, I hesitated, but you didn't. And you took him out.
Mm.
And, military terms, he was telling me what I did. And I didn't remember that. And so anyway, that started a better path on therapy, because I had to face that. And started dealing with that in therapy, and even got sent to my priest to help out with my therapist.
In some ways, you think that might be a gift not to remember that.
Exactly.
So the mind sort of goes, I want to push that out of my consciousness because it was so awful.
That's right.
Killing people, seeing your buddies killed, that kind of thing.
You want to know, but yeah, I understood that. And after trying to develop a timeline over the 2-year period to try to fill in the blanks, and I did fill in a few blanks, not like that one that I just mentioned, but I filled in a lot of blanks from letters that I wrote to my girlfriend, who is not my wife. I told her a lot of things, not the gross things, but I told her a lot of information that I didn't know until I reread those letters, until I wrote her that I had written, and learned a lot. That's the best I did on the timeline. But at the end, yeah, I came to the realization that, yeah, it's a gift, that I probably was saved a lot of pain and suffering in my family because I don't have memory of that.
Yeah. So what were the negative effects of the post-traumatic syndrome, whatever that means? I mean, how did that affect your life negatively after Vietnam?
Well, it was a lot of, looking back, a lot of drinking, drugs. My wife, we got married pretty quick after I got back. She knew there was something different. My best friends, some of them, we were married, started hanging out, but my wife says now, she never knew that I was doing drugs. I was just drinking alcohol. But yeah, that's a negative effect. And then the arguments and whatever about, really, you're the post-traumatic stress, the injury to our brain, kind of the common sense part of our brain is affected. And so it's a life and death situation, and it's we don't, we get pissed at people, civilians, all the time they take to, decisions have to be made, or like trying to figure out what cereal to buy at the grocery store, thousands of cereals. And, that's what the civilians are, that's what the veterans talk about. Hey, that's not what we're about. Now we're about surviving. And I guess we came home, but we came home with a war. Everything is like life and death. And we're pretty cold and not understanding some, the simple things, And so, yeah, it affected, especially, my wife talks, her favorite story is that she was pregnant, and, one morning I didn't get up. And so she came to wake me up. And before she knew it, I had her in a headlock.
Oh my goodness.
She startled me, and
Yeah.
so that was early. That was early. We got pregnant pretty quick after we got married. And so after that, it was, we got to be real careful. How do you wake me up? How you approach me? And the kids grew up with that also, that you got to be careful with that in that respect and all that.
Wow.
Some of the negative stuff there.
Yeah. So, how many children did you have?
4.
Okay. So you were raising a family with the sort of unconscious cloud of post-traumatic syndrome, and reacting in certain ways that were kind of unconscious to you, sort of tapped into the military mindset, or the war mindset. So how did that affect you raising your children?
Oh, in a lot of ways, the kids even talk about, how it was growing up. Yeah, talking about those stories about be careful with dad, and you can't approach him. But yeah, that's a lot of, and the kids start when we talk about it, because my 2 kids help with veterans in the program that I have, and tell their stories about growing up with dad.
Yeah.
But the kid, they come back and say, look, that was a minor part, because we have nothing but good memories of growing up camping, fishing, traveling, and with dad. But yeah, that's a little piece back there, that we want to share for veterans to be aware, because post-traumatic stress affects everybody in the family.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking, because my dad was a career Air Force officer, and this isn't something I've really visited. I really haven't. And, my dad had issues. He didn't have a great relationship with his kids. He was kind of impatient about things, being, when you're, especially, he was a commanding officer. He commanded an Air Force base in one of his stations, in Sardinia, in Italy, and he was second in command in many places. So he was a very responsible person. He flew jets and flew Stingrays in the war. I mean, so he was a smart guy, but he wasn't exactly warm and caring.
Correct.
So that he was impatient and angry, and I inherited some of that from him.
That's
So
right.
that's something I've been working with, but I never thought of it in terms of, it's what happened in the war. Like, I don't know what happened in the war. He told me a little bit. He
Very little.
he wasn't in direct combat on the ground. He was in planes all the
Right.
time. He was doing reconnaissance flights. He was being shot at. He didn't do aerial warfare or stuff like that, as far as I know. But nevertheless, he was facing death. And that's what war is about. You're facing death. You don't know. Tomorrow, that might be my last day. You never know, right? And it's an increased chance compared to everyday life.
Now, see, and there's so many people, veterans, and even veterans that like me, that are even Vietnam veterans that are still out there that have never come to terms or never realized it. They don't realize what trauma is playing in their life. Now they're 70 and 80 years old, and they've lived and never heard or dealt with post-traumatic stress. And a lot of them had good lives. Most of them have had good lives, but it's just something that's like you say, it's there. And so people, we get people to come to our program, and they come and they have no idea. They thought it's going to be a good time, reconnect with veterans, but so we start talking about trauma and explaining what trauma is, and they start opening up. And wow, I got to look at this. And so we help them look at things which takes the sting off. Take the sting off and going home and talking a little bit more about it.
Yeah, interesting. So it's still, I'm sure it's different from everybody, but maybe somebody isn't a hair trigger about certain things or they hear a loud noise and
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Loud noises for people in combat. Yeah, but things like going to a restaurant, and my wife finally understood that I had to have my back, at the restaurant, sitting with my back to the wall because I had to be watching the door. And see, and my
so
kids,
you're in military preparation mode all the time.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
That we came back, and veterans today from all the wars are coming back, but they bring in the war with them, and they have it inside, and they have no idea what they're carrying, and how it affects their behavior and relationships and all.
Because it's a matter of survival in the war. You've got to survive, and if you're not alert, aware, whatever, at all times, you're in trouble. My father had a same problem that I have, is I don't like things to be disorganized. I don't like messes. And if you're a top Air Force officer, things have got to be shipshape.
That's right.
What is that piece of rust doing there? Everything, because if the equipment isn't working right, it could fail. And if it fails, you're in trouble. That kind of thing, right?
It's life and death. Everything is life and death.
Yeah. And obviously, in ordinary life, when your desk is a little bit messy, it's not life and death, but it makes me anxious.
That's right.
And I really like things to be organized, and I won't get into all the impact that has had on my wife, because it's like when I can see I can't remember my father teaching me this, so I don't even know if this is directly connected, but it sounds similar. It's like,
it is.
And then you feel angry. It's like, clean that up, Jesus, can't you do that? And that affects your life. So
that's right. No, it is connected. It's it's all in your world. So that's what my kids learned everything. Everything that that they learned, I was responsible for. My wife and I, and fortunately, we started. I was always asking questions. I got into self-improvement stuff. In my career. And after being diagnosed, I said, that's what I was searching for, a better way for understand. So, to make things perfect, and with the managers in my job and all that stuff, and teaching them, this is the way it has to be done. This is it, And so, yeah, it was just my trauma had a lot, and what had a lot to do with it. But then it was great stuff. What I learned in the military made me a successful person. All the leadership skills, I had
Yeah.
training for a whole year that got me into training and doing all kinds of cool stuff. Yeah. So it kept me sane, and it helped me understand myself and get me to that point where I saw trauma, and the search got even bigger to understand what it was and what it had done to me, the role it had played in my life. And that's why I started the program. When I, came back, I said, look, I got to do this for other people. Veterans need to know about this stuff.
Yeah. So as a result of doing that therapy, increasing your awareness of how the war had affected you and having post-traumatic stress syndrome, et cetera, what kind of things started to change in your life and open up in your life, with that new awareness?
With the awareness?
Yeah.
Well, you become more calm. And that's what in therapy, that's, I guess, I went to probably a year or better of therapy. They put me in the hospital, for a couple of months in cognitive therapy. It was incredible, just the breathing. I really, connected with how to breathe and how that calms you down. That helped me. That to this day, breathing is so important to, and it gets into meditation. Yeah, you start paying attention to your breathing, and it really calms you down. And so that's what I learned in cognitive therapy, and it continued. And so that's what I, try to, in everything we do is help the veterans understand trauma and, the role it played, and that talking about it, we have to talk about it. It takes the sting off when because they don't, they won't talk to civilians. We know that they have to come and talk to veterans and start getting that stuff out.
Yeah, it's not something you can easily talk to your wife or your children about.
No, it's not.
I mean, you can't do therapy with your kids as the therapist. So you end up acting out, and this is giving me some insight into my dad, who has passed. He passed a number of years ago, and he was a very successful person,
right?
Which is interesting because I think there's two big things in life: success and happiness, and often success or happiness suffers because of success, and they're not balanced in many cases. I'm very successful but not happy is often the situation, or I'm really happy but not very successful.
So no, the balance, and yeah, that's the therapy and understanding what happened to me. I was able to lead a successful life, and at the same time experience joy and peace. That's the key. That we don't, the peace and joy is elusive, with all this stuff that we have in our head. And,
yeah.
And so that's what got me to this point in life. That I had a successful career. My kids are, well adjusted, and now, my wife and I are having a good time. And so something that you just mentioned, that we continue to struggle because of what we just mentioned, that things have to be perfect. And so there's, and I think that we're struggling now with wanting everything to be perfect when it's great already. I want to keep pushing, and maybe, just in talking to you, see, I learned something that right now that I need to look at that, when she comes home from grocery shopping today. Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of people individually in my career, meeting with people like this on Zoom or individually. For the last 20 years, I've been virtual. So I've been meeting with people on the phone and by Zoom, and worked with hundreds of people. And, these are people that struggled with their business and with their marketing. And the thing that I discovered is that it wasn't the techniques of marketing that were difficult to understand for most people. For some people who didn't have issues, they learned the techniques and then they just used them, and then they got out there and they talked to people and they found out how to promote themselves, right? But for some people, they obviously had bigger issues. They were afraid of approaching people. So that doesn't mean that they had post-traumatic stress syndrome, but we have a lot of stuff that happens in our lives. There's other things that are traumatic other than war.
That's
right. You decide you're a kid and you decide to sell Girl Scout cookies as a little girl, and everybody slams the door on you, and then you make up a story about, well, people don't like me and you can't do that, and selling is bad, and whatever it is.
Right.
So the point is that war has happened that is a very, very big impact that makes you adjust your behavior to survive. But that happens to a lot of people for a lot of different things.
That's right.
All kinds of things. I mean, I had people that would I say, you belong to this organization. And these are people who could be clients or help you get clients. I'd like you to try to reach out to some of these people. I had this one guy, happened to be an attorney, and every week I talked to him, and he had not done it, and he just wouldn't do it. It was, and how hard is it to reach out to people? Well, for some people, it's rocket science. So just, to give you an idea, some people really struggle with things, and sometimes I could help them, but sometimes people like that need therapy to figure out what is it that's preventing me from doing this, or making me do this thing that's unproductive, or making me really impatient or angry, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So there's no such thing as a person that gets into adulthood that has no problems and everything is wonderful.
Yeah.
Everybody has issues.
Everybody, and really, talking specifically about trauma, I guess they estimate that 65% of the population has experienced trauma.
65% of the population has some kind of trauma.
Right.
Yeah, and it could have been when you were just a little kid and something happened, and then you adjusted your behavior because of that, or you were always afraid of this, or you avoided that, or blah 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 blah.
Oh yeah.
And this is humankind. So something clicked with me though, because early in my life, in high school, I got interested in personal development.
Wow.
I got into transcendental meditation. I started to read spiritual books, a lot of them, to figure out what the heck is going on.
Really?
So,
yeah, it was about you. Yeah, that was touching something inside of you.
Yeah. So all of that helped, but some of this stuff is so buried and so automatic.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing about, I've really been working on this thing about not getting triggered by disorganization. And, because it really triggers me. Yeah. I mean, I don't fly into a rage and throw things, but it upsets me. It's like, it makes me feel really nervous. It makes me feel, if things are cleaner and more organized, I feel better, And now, these days, I can look at a mess and it's like, well, I can clean up, but I don't feel angry and upset. So look, I'm 72 years old. It took me a long time to get to that.
But that's a big word. See, the word trigger
Yeah,
for me and my wife, I talk a lot about it, because that's the issue, that there's so many things that she tells me, says, or whatever trigger me. So she kind of started talking about, not using the word trigger, you know, but that for me, triggers is a big thing with the trauma, but it's with a lot of people, you know. For me, I feel like it's because of the war trauma that they're bigger, and some of them are really pretty big. But I think I've resolved, learned to accept, and move on, from a trigger.
yeah. But it can take some work because a trigger is hardwired in our consciousness. There's a lot of complicated stuff going on up there, and so
Oh yeah,
this means that always, and
oh yeah,
until you break it down and say, well, this doesn't really mean that. This is just a reaction
oh yeah. So
based
many
on whatever.
conversations her and I have had about that I'm trying to stop myself, you know, and think about the trigger, but it's so fast, and you've moved on from it,
Right.
that it's taken me a long time to hesitate or stop
Yeah.
at that point, and even harder to say something about it. You got to say something about it, or you know, think about it to take the sting off of it and try to work that moment through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But working on it intentionally, consciously, knowing that there are issues, you start to see changes.
Oh
Maybe
yeah,
slowly but surely.
that's the key.
Yeah.
That is the big key.
See,
And
Stan.
that's what we do with the veterans, try to explain it. I had one veteran one time
Yeah.
came through the program, and he had just this incredible experience, because his platoon had been wiped out, and he and another guy were the survivors. And so you can imagine what he carried. And so he came and resolved that. And he went that night, he went to sleep. He had never slept since he got back from Vietnam. He had never slept more than 4 hours at a time. And when he did that process and went through he, in the morning, the people came and said, "Hey, this guy he's still asleep, And we said, "Let him sleep." We finally woke him up, and he had slept 7.5 hours. So anyway, then it was time for him to come back. He did a lot of stuff. And so now we wanted him to come back with his wife, because that's a big piece of our program also, is that, now the wife needs to understand that too. He said, "Sam, I can't do it. I can't go through what I did for myself. And then my wife and I have a lot of stuff, and I don't think I can do that." I said, "Look, what you did is gone. It's gone. It's never going to be the same. What you did is never going to happen again. It might be emotional, but it's not going to be to that point, or you'll be able to work with it." And sure enough, he came, and he and his wife did some incredible stuff. And he was so excited, for him and his wife to resolve a lot of crap.
Yeah.
And he thanked me. He said, "Look, yeah." And they continue. Matter of fact, they started their own program working with military couples. Yeah. So anyway, but
Wow.
we got to get it out. That's the key.
Yeah. Is the military itself doing anything to address this post-service?
Yeah, they're getting better at it. They're doing a lot of stuff. They're now doing the modalities that work better. EMDR and the cognitive therapy has changed to meditation. They're even doing, but there's just so many, and the government is not enough. It's not enough. So the community, all of us that run nonprofits, we all play a big part.
Yeah.
In addressing this issue and finding veterans in the community, because I just read this morning about the suicides from the Vietnam guys. These guys are now 70, 80, and there's still a problem with suicide. with the few ones that are left. Because most of it, there's very, compared to how many there were, there's a very few, but there's still the problem with suicide because they isolate and they start thinking and their trauma comes out and before they die. Yeah.
Yeah. Is the suicide rate for veterans higher than the ordinary population? Do you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Without it. Oh, easy. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Forget the exact numbers, but yeah, there's the number the number was 22 a day commit suicide, and that's probably still
Really?
veterans.
Wow.
That's it's still a big issue. Yeah, and now looking at the military, and our program has changed over the years, and now really we have so many females coming that a lot of them have war trauma more than you expect, but there's a lot of them that the big thing is military sexual trauma. Yeah, that they're dealing with, and so that's what we help them with.
Yeah. There's movies that address this, but kind of in a sensationalistic way. He has post-traumatic stress syndrome, and therefore he becomes a psychopath, and he does, but that sells tickets because it's dramatic.
Oh yeah.
But the everyday person like you, it's something that maybe someone has done a movie about this. I wouldn't be surprised if there's been some stuff about this. But well written, well scripted, well thought out.
There's a lot of them. As a matter of fact, we've been involved in a couple of them that people have come to us and help. Ask for help to do movies. And really, I guess I shouldn't say movies. I think they're documentaries.
Right.
About trauma and all that stuff. And they put a good product out to educate.
Yeah.
To educate the world. Because it's a thing that we have to continue talking about because like so many people like you that your father probably experienced. I'm pretty sure he experienced trauma or had some sort of post-traumatic stress, but he never knew about it. Yeah, and he might have.
Yeah, I mean, he's lucky that he got out of the war alive. We just have gone through the 80th anniversary D-Day celebrations or memoriam. And, I was shocked to hear the percentage of people that were killed just in that first day on the beach. They never got 10 yards and they were killed. But the ones that got through, they lived with trauma, it's almost unimaginable. They keep playing the reels over and over again. You see these people along the beach and you see them and it's not a movie. These are people really dying. It was terrifying. And the sacrifice that they made to save civilization as we know it is really something. But
it's a pretty horrible thing that we need to understand, and it seems like we could understand it that we would prevent, but war just keeps happening over and over again everywhere.
Yeah, I can imagine what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. I mean, it's probably even worse in Russia because a lot of these Russian soldiers are kept on the front lines over and over and over again. So many have died. 350,000 have died in the last estimate. So what impact has that had on the families? And then there's so much disinformation. I mean, God, it's hard to imagine how terrible it is for
it is. It's
people in Russia.
It's worse than that because these families, there's no front line. The war is everything. Your house, and you open the door, it's right there. And then unexpectedly ill, your house and your family disappear from a bomb. Living with that is
Yeah.
unravel.
Yeah. What Ukraine has gone through is horrific. So um, I hope if and when this war ends, groups like yours can find a way to help these people. They seem to be ridiculously resolute, but you can be a heroic person, you can be a strong person, you can be a good person, but if you have trauma, you didn't have a choice about that. You don't go, I'm going to be the person that doesn't have trauma. I mean, it doesn't work that way.
Nope.
The house next door to you blows up and your wife and kids die or whatever, which has happened.
Oh yeah.
That's going to affect you, and you might be resolute now, but after the war, and hopefully when it ends, they're going to have issues.
Oh yeah. And
And there's a very human thing to want to smooth things over, to cover things over, to calm things down, as opposed to get at the truth, to unearth the issues like you're doing in your group.
right.
And that's it's so easy to just, well, let's just move on. But and you do the best you can, and nevertheless you're traumatized and your life will never be the same, and it might be awful.
Yeah,
You know?
it's yeah, to not want to talk about it, and that's an issue with all programs like ours. That we you know uh, we're offering this education weekend at free. We'll even fly you here and for 3 days education on trauma, and people sign up. Right now, we're getting so many people signed up. We have 35 signed up in May. Uh, we had 13 complete the registration process. And then at the last minute, people start dropping off for whatever reason. I think one of the reasons is that, yeah, they realize that they're going to have to come talk about something very personal. And so we wound up with 5 veterans at the program in May. Of course, those veterans, we try to, and it's the truth. Those were the veterans that were supposed to be here because each one had an incredible experience, and that's who we serve. That's enough. But yeah, your point about the 35, they know they have something's going on. They reached out for help, but they couldn't follow through,
Right.
complete the process. And it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to put yourself out and open yourself up in front of the public,
Yeah. Yeah.
But if they only knew what that means, that means so much for the person, for the pride and joy in finding peace and understanding, to have a better life. Which they
Yeah.
probably already have a good life and all that stuff, but this is something that's in the back of their head.
Well, you can have a good life in terms of success. You got a good job. You were responsible. You worked hard. You were a good boss, whatever. You made a lot of money, but you're not happy. You're miserable. You're stressed. You've got heart disease, whatever.
Yeah.
So, there's a different possibility for life, which is to have joy and fulfillment and more love. And this post-traumatic stress syndrome
What you just mentioned is something we haven't talked about, is that, yeah, the effect on my body. And
yeah.
that's the reason, I didn't go do a second career. I had a second career to go to, but I had a heart attack the year before I retired. And my cardiologist, who did his residency at the VA, first one to tell me, he said, "Look, you have post-traumatic stress. That had a lot to do with your heart attack." And he helped me file my first claim with the VA. But then he said, "Look, you're going to go to a career and you're going to get into the same stress you were in the last one. So so the second heart attack is going to be easier than the first one. So really think about what you want to do. Take care of yourself." And that's, I told the guys that that I was going to go work with. I said, look, I'm going to take off a year. I'm going to retire and take care, find out what is happening, what
Yep.
I've learned. And so I'll see you guys in a year. And I remember one day my wife said, guess what today is? Today is a year. He said, well, I said, what are we going to do? I said, what do you think we ought to do? So the decision was that, I didn't need to work. I couldn't go back to work. It was better to take care of myself. And we had
So you were able to retire. You were financially in a position you could retire.
Oh yeah.
Well,
yeah, I was. That's another thing. I was so fortunate. Yeah, that I was. I was. I have a good federal retirement at 57. I had mandatory retirement. And I was going to go to a second career. And most of the guys said, "Hey, you could make more money in a second career. Consulting, you can make more money." I said, I could just see myself killing myself to make more money than I made before.
Yeah.
And so here we are. We started working with veterans and started working for free and, in the world. And it feels good most of the time. And overall, it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
You really bring a lot. I can just see that you're joyful about this. You're happy about this, the difference that you're making.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Yeah, because we had already turned the nonprofit over to another group, some friends. And, I was still on the board. My wife completely stepped out. But then something happened and they were going to let it go. I said, I can't. And so we've come back and my wife says, we're too old to do this. And so we were talking about it just a few nights ago. And I said, we're talking about all the problems and all that stuff. I said, but look, it feels different now, running this organization. So many things are happening that I'm doing different that I think I'm learning. I've learned to do it right. I used to shuttle people to the airport and I used to shuttle, pick up food for the program and all that. I said, this last weekend was the first time that I didn't do any of that. I called people and all that. Volunteers did everything, but I always loved doing that.
Yeah.
But now, I said, it just happened. I said, so we're doing something different. I'm doing something different and it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels very good. So here we are.
So this Texas for Heroes, this is, what city are you in?
Pardon? Houston.
You're in Houston. Okay.
I'm in Houston.
Now, are there do people come from all over the country or just from Texas?
No, they come from all over the country. They're finding us on the internet.
Okay.
I just got off the phone with a lady. She heard it from a friend at another veterans program.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get this out to people, so more people are going to learn about this. So don't expect a million calls tomorrow, but
No, I've got
getting the word out about good things like this is part of the mission of Ordinary Visionaries.
Yes.
So are there other organizations that do programs like this around the country, or do you have a network of them?
No, there's a lot of them. I just had a gentleman that was talking to me about a donation, and he told me, he said, look, I have 3 veterans organizations that I work with. What are you in those 3? And so the other ones there, I said, they're both larger. One of them is sort of a hospital. They find veterans and they're saving a lot of lives. They're finding veterans in dire need, putting them, giving them a home, keeping them in programs, sending them to therapy, getting them in the VA. I said the other program is also very large, but and they're both PTSD programs. We're all PTSD programs, but they are dealing with post-traumatic stress by taking veterans on adventures, and it is helpful. You go and you spend a week river rafting or skiing or whatever. I said that means so much to a veteran. I said, however, we're a small one and we're dealing directly with the problem that veterans have in their head. We're helping them understand themselves better for a long term.
Yeah.
Understand what happened. And I said, so that's the difference. So yeah, there are a lot of organizations, and like I said before, the VA can't do it. The VA can't do it. They're trying and they're doing a good job, but there's so many veterans, and a lot of them don't want to go to the VA. Say, look, we're here. So it's going to take the community, to get a better handle or to keep addressing this problem.
So I'm interested is, you were from the Vietnam era. The people from World War II have pretty much passed on.
Right.
But we have the Gulf War, and there's a lot, Afghanistan,
Iraq. Yeah.
Iraq.
Now it's the Vietnam guys are in the forefront, and Iraq and Afghanistan, really. I remember going through all the process. When I started the program, it was all Vietnam veterans. And I remember that weekend I was sitting there and I said, wow, I'm the only Vietnam veteran here. And then, wow, a few years later, there's more women than men here now. Started, all the changes that happened, but the war is the same.
Yeah.
The war is the same. And this thing, trauma is basically the same thing. The veterans start talking about how different they are, and they come to realize, hey, we're all talking about the same thing, and we're helping each other, just hearing each other's stories, understanding something I hadn't even thought about it, and I'm doing it every day. Yeah, so it's a good thing.
Yeah. So, Samuel, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I found it really interesting and encouraging and inspiring.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for being an ordinary visionary.
Thank you for having me, and have a great day.